And good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hey, how do you like my Hawaiian shirt? Got that in Maui last year when I was over there speaking at a seminar. Tough gig, you know. Anyway, I'm sharing with you some thoughts as a result of some viewers' questions about Gog and Magog. It seems that on a lot of dispensational boards right now, it's being claimed that there are absolutely no answers from the dispensational, or excuse me, the preterist world about Gog and Magog, that it completely refutes preterism. Well, I'm sharing with you a few thoughts in response to that request. Gog and Magog is certainly, I mean, as far as I know, virtually every commentator who has ever written says it's one of the most difficult chapters, or two chapters in the entire Bible. But what we do know is that it places the events in the last days. Now, it really doesn't matter what else we may think, no matter what our perception as to the nature of the things being predicted. When the Bible very explicitly gives us the time reference for when these things were to be, then it is incumbent upon us to bring our concepts of the nature of the events into conformity of the time of the events. With that in mind, Ezekiel 38, for instance, verse 16, specifically says that it would be in the last days. So, what are the last days? Well, Joel chapter 2, 28 and following said, "It shall come to pass in the last days that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy," etc., etc. This would be the time of the salvation of the remnant. And I recommend or suggest that the salvation of the remnant is a motif that is found, although not explicitly stated, but it is implicit in Ezekiel 38 and 39. We'll put that to another discussion. But notice that Joel predicted the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in the last days. Ezekiel 38 and 39 put Gog and Magog in the last days. Therefore, pardon me. Therefore, the events of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, as well as Gog and Magog, belong to the same time period. Now, here's what's interesting. The outpouring of the Holy Spirit was to be poured out in the last days before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. Joel 2, Acts 2. Gog and Magog occurs at the end of the millennium, immediately before the final destruction, i.e., the great and terrible day of the Lord. So again, we have perfect consistency. Well, watch this. In Acts chapter 2, the disciples were overwhelmed with the Holy Spirit. They began to speak in tongues as the Holy Spirit gave them utterance. Acts 2, 1-5. They were accused of being drunken. Peter stood up and said, "These men are not drunk, as you suppose, seeing it's but the third hour of the day." Now watch this. This is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. Now, Arnold Fruchtenbaum, in a 3-page paper sent to me by Thomas Ice, said that virtually nothing that happened on Pentecost resembled what Joel wrote. Really? Now, I want to be kind here, but let's be honest, okay? Joel said, in the last days, the Spirit would be poured out. Peter said, now watch what Peter says. This is that which was spoken by Joel. He did not say, this is like what Joel said. He did not say, this is like what it will be when Joel is fulfilled. He said, this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. Joel predicted the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit was poured out on Pentecost. Joel predicted the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, miracles following. Outpouring of the Holy Spirit, miracles following on Pentecost. Joel predicted the outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the house of Israel. Acts chapter 2, outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the house of Israel. Everything about Acts chapter 2 is Joel chapter 2. But of course, obviously, the point in regard to Gog and Magog is this. Since Peter declares that the events of Pentecost were what Joel predicted. Now, pretty obviously, Acts chapter 2 and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit is not the great and terrible day of the Lord. It is a sign of the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. And oh, by the way, Peter warned that audience, save yourselves from this untoward generation. So, Ezekiel predicted, pardon me, Gog and Magog in the last days. Peter said Joel's prediction of the last days was being fulfilled on Pentecost. Once again, that tells us unequivocally, undeniably, and irrefutably that the time frame, the time period in which Gog and Magog had to take place was present in the first century. And I suggest to you, that's why Peter said, save yourselves from this untoward generation. Hey, thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Apologize for my voice. It's still rough from being gone over last weekend and the conference. Remember, I've written a book, The Last Days Identified. I examine every single Old Testament and New Testament passage that discusses the last days in any detail. And I demonstrate that the last days are in fact Old Covenant Israel's last days, not the last days of the Christian age, not the Christian age. If you go to my websites, www.eschatology.org and BibleProphecy.com, and you order a copy of The Last Days Identified, and you mention, saw your offer on YouTube, I will refund your shipping. It's a great offer. It'll save you almost $5. So order your copy today. Once again, thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning News. Bon café to my friends, especially in France. And we'll see you on the flip side, which will now be Monday. And I'm headed to an automotive swap meet today. We'll see you on the flip side.